3 months ago, I got the news that my Uncle Frank had passed away. We'd never been particularly close, so it came as a surprise when I found out he'd left me one of his houses in his will. While the gesture was touching, my first instinct was to sell it. I'm a new dad to twin girls, and managing a property on top of everything else was the last thing I needed. To move things along, I decided to temporarily relocate to the house, which was across the country, until I could secure a buyer. Luckily, my job only requires a laptop and phone, so I got approval to work remotely for the time being. Unfortunately, my wife had to stay behind to keep up with her own job, which meant I'd be handling this venture solo. At first, I treated the trip like a little vacation. I'd hoped to wrap everything up within a week, but it quickly became clear that selling a house is more complicated than I'd anticipated. Though I had a realtor managing most of the details, weeks stretched into a month, and there I was, still stuck in that house. Strange things began happening almost immediately. Items I'd left in one place would inexplicably end up somewhere else. Shadows flickered in my peripheral vision. Time seemed to slip away from me, hour after hour. I chalked it up to stress or maybe even loneliness. Apart from occasional visits from the realtor showing the property to potential buyers, the house was eerily silent, a quiet I wasn't used to. One day, before I could spiral too far into my thoughts, the neighbor stopped by, holding a leash with a golden retriever on the other end. She was an elderly woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Jenkins. She explained that she'd been taking care of the dog, named Buster, while my uncle was in the hospital. Now that I was here, she figured it was time for Buster to return home. I found it odd when she mentioned that my uncle had passed just last week, but I didn't press the matter. Either way, I fell for Buster immediately. His cheerful presence was exactly what I needed to keep my spirits up. I even started imagining him as a surprise for my girls once I got back home. I just hoped my wife would be on board with the idea. But even Buster seemed uneasy in the house. He adapted quickly to living with me but steadfastly refused to go upstairs. At the time, I didn't think much of it. If anything, it made keeping an eye on him easier. Then one day, Buster vanished. I'd been in the kitchen, reaching into the cabinet for the treat jar, with him sitting right behind me. The moment I turned back to put the jar away, he was gone. I searched the entire house, calling his name over and over. The layout was straightforward. The kitchen opened into the living room, which connected to the master bedroom and a small study. On the opposite end, the kitchen led to the dining room, which looped back to the entryway and staircase. Upstairs, a balcony overlooked both the living room and entryway. On one side, there was a guest room and a game room. On the other, 2 more guest rooms and a bathroom. I checked every nook and cranny, but there was no sign of Buster. Convinced he'd somehow slipped outside, I combed the neighborhood for an hour before heading back in defeat. When I finally returned home, I opened the front door to hear Buster's paws scrambling across the kitchen floor. Relief washed over me, but I couldn't shake the confusion. How could I have missed him? That night, I let him sleep in my bed, a decision I'd later regret, though it brought me comfort at the time. Work soon picked up, and the house's oddities faded to the back of my mind. My days became consumed with landing big contracts and juggling calls with important clients. Though I was glued to my laptop, the constant activity felt rewarding. I was even expecting a promotion when I returned to the office. But the long hours took a toll. I'd lose track of time, forgetting to eat or even sleep. Buster often whined to go out, but I was too busy to notice until he got insistent. To stay on top of things, I started setting alarms. Despite my neglect, I managed to take care of Buster better than I was caring for myself. Then one night, everything changed. I was finishing a spreadsheet while Buster whined behind me when we both heard it. A loud, unmistakable slam of a door upstairs. For the first time, Buster bolted up the stairs without hesitation. Gripping my phone, I debated calling the cops but hesitated, unsure if I'd imagined it. If there really was an intruder, wouldn't Buster have been barking? Summoning all my courage, I grabbed a frying pan from the kitchen and crept upstairs. The hallway was dark, the light switch unresponsive. Moonlight from downstairs barely illuminated the scene. Buster stood frozen in front of the bathroom, tail stiff. I distinctly remembered closing every door upstairs earlier, yet now the bathroom door was wide open. My heart raced as I stepped closer. The bathroom was pitch black, no window to let in even a sliver of light. I tried to convince myself Buster's calmness was a good sign. He wasn't barking after all. Still, I hesitated until I realized I had my phone in my pocket. Its flashlight revealed the bathroom was empty, but as I stepped inside, my shoe landed in something sticky. Turning the light downward, I froze. A puddle of bright red liquid surrounded my feet. Panic overtook me, and I bolted downstairs, Buster at my heels. This time, I called the police. Buster was lying on his side, whimpering softly, his breathing shallow. I gently placed a hand on his fur, apologizing in a broken whisper. His ears twitched slightly, but he didn't lift his head. At least he was alive, and for the moment that was enough to keep me tethered to some semblance of reality. I looked back toward the bedroom door. The officer's lifeless body lay motionless in the dim light from the hallway. Blood pooled on the floor beneath him, the crimson reflecting the grotesque writing that still dripped from the walls. "Losing your mind?" stared back at me from every angle, mocking my growing despair. This couldn't be real. Couldn't be real. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my forehead, trying to think, trying to piece together what to do next. I had to leave. There was no other option. But the house, this thing, wasn't going to let me go easily. The sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs, slow and deliberate. My breath caught in my throat. Someone or something was still up there. It wasn't the officer, and it definitely wasn't my wife. The heavy steps moved toward the stairs, and I froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. Buster whimpered again, drawing my attention. I couldn't leave him here, not after everything we'd been through. Summoning all the strength I had left, I scooped him up into my arms. He felt heavier than ever, his body limp but warm. I staggered toward the front door, gripping the knob with one hand while holding him tightly with the other. It didn't budge. The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs with a menacing rhythm. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound deafening in my ears. Desperation surged through me, and I slammed my shoulder against the door, over and over, praying it would give way. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. I turned my head slowly, peering over my shoulder. The staircase was empty. The dim light from the living room cast long shadows, but nothing moved. A low growl rumbled from Buster's throat, and his body tensed in my arms. His eyes locked on something behind me, something I couldn't see. My pulse quickened, and I turned back to the door, frantically searching for another way out. The sliding glass door in the kitchen. It had opened before, maybe it would again. I ran, nearly tripping over the corner of the rug as I rounded the couch. Buster yelped softly but didn't resist. The glass door came into view, and for a brief moment, hope flared in my chest. I reached out and gripped the handle, pulling with all my strength. It didn't move. "No, no, no," I muttered, panic creeping into my voice. I jiggled the handle, slamming my fist against the glass in frustration. Buster growled again, louder this time, his body trembling in my arms. Behind us, a voice spoke, a low, guttural whisper that sent chills racing down my spine. "Why are you running?" I spun around, pressing myself against the glass, my eyes darting around the room. There was no one there, just shadows, stretching and twisting unnaturally, as if the darkness itself was alive. The voice came again, closer this time. "You're not going anywhere." I clutched Buster tighter, my knuckles white with fear. My eyes locked on the frying pan still lying on the kitchen counter. It wasn't much, but it was something. I shifted Buster onto one arm and reached for the pan, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. And then I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form shifting and indistinct, like smoke trapped in a human shape. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and its grin stretched far too wide, revealing jagged, inhuman teeth. "Stay," it hissed, its voice echoing unnaturally. I swung the frying pan with all my might, the movement clumsy with Buster still in my arms. The figure dissolved upon impact, the shadows scattering like ink in water. But the laughter remained, reverberating through the house, taunting me. I didn't wait to see if it would return. With a surge of adrenaline, I ran back to the front door. This time, I didn't stop to think. I kicked at the deadbolt over and over, each impact sending shocks of pain through my leg. The laughter grew louder, and the walls began to shake, the messages on them bleeding into each other until the words became unreadable. Finally, with one last desperate kick, the deadbolt gave way, and the door swung open. Cold night air hit my face, and I stumbled outside, nearly dropping Buster in the process. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I ran down the driveway, my legs screaming in protest, until I reached the street. My friend's car was there, just as he had said. He jumped out, his face pale with worry as he rushed toward me. "What the hell happened?" he asked, his eyes darting to the house. I didn't answer. Couldn't. I just collapsed into his arms, clutching Buster tightly, and whispered the only thing I could manage. "Drive." He wasn't moving. I placed my head gently on his flank, my heart sinking as I realized he was still warm but no longer breathing. Buster was gone. I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing. For a long time, I simply existed in that void. My body moved sluggishly, and somehow I ended up on the couch in the living room. I waited there, staring into the dim light filtering through the windows. Night fell, and I stayed put, eventually falling into an uneasy sleep. When I woke up, I waited some more. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, but nothing horrible had happened while I was still. That fragile calm was something I wasn't ready to disrupt. Yet the bodies, Buster's, and the cops remained. I couldn't ignore them forever. My stomach growled as I finally rose from the couch. Hunger clawed at me, another problem I'd have to face soon. First things first. I found a shovel in the outdoor closet attached to the backyard porch. Digging the hole for Buster was physically and emotionally draining. I decided I'd handle the cop later, after finding something to eat. Carrying Buster's lifeless body outside was harder than I expected. His fur still felt so warm, almost alive. It was hard to believe he was gone, but the absence of life in his big brown eyes made it undeniable. I lowered him into the shallow grave and began to cover him with earth. Some time later, I stumbled back into the kitchen, driven by hunger. The house was eerily silent, apart from the noises I made. Whenever I stopped moving, the silence felt suffocating, as if it were waiting for something. For the first time, I wondered if the ghosts had achieved their goal. Maybe all they wanted was for me to become a murderer. If that was the case, perhaps they'd leave me alone now. The thought gave me a fragile sense of relief, just enough to focus on eating. I ripped open a box of cereal and brought a handful to my mouth. But before I could take a bite, a chilling thought froze me in place. What if it wasn't cereal? What if the ghosts had turned it into rat poison? Or worms? The image of writhing worms in my mouth was too vivid. I threw the cereal to the floor and stormed out of the kitchen, hunger forgotten. My focus shifted back to leaving the house. As if in answer to my thoughts, I passed by the front door. It was wide open. Instinctively, I lunged for it but stopped short, my hand hovering a foot away. This had to be another trick. I imagined the door slamming shut on my fingers or some unseen force pulling me back inside. A cool breeze brushed past me, but fear rooted me in place. Freedom beckoned, but trust was impossible. My senses had betrayed me too many times. Still, desperation won out and I forced myself to move. Stepping outside, I saw the cop car sitting in the driveway. The door was unlocked, and the keys were in the ignition. My mind raced to make sense of it. Maybe the cop had been hiding a dark secret. Maybe his death had broken the house's curse. Or maybe I was just lucky. I shoved my doubts aside and got in. Starting the car felt like salvation. I drove out of the neighborhood without looking back, savoring the sunlight on my face. Freedom felt surreal. Left turn, right turn, left turn, right turn. I drove aimlessly, letting the roads guide me. But then I noticed something strange. The streets were deserted. I hadn't seen another car or person for miles. Where was everyone? Where was I? That sinking feeling crept back, pulling me into its depths. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but when I looked down, I was gripping the arms of an armchair instead. The car was gone. The road was gone. I was back in the living room of my uncle's house. My arms moved as if I were still driving, my body mimicking the act in some grotesque pantomime. Realization hit like a punch to the gut, and I let out a frustrated scream. How long had I been sitting there, acting like a fool? The dining room table caught my eye. My work laptop was there, its screen glowing faintly. I approached it cautiously and saw that something had already been typed out. Lost your mind? Good. Now you won't mind losing the rest. My fist felt heavy. I looked down and saw a knife in my hand. Panic surged as I dropped it, the clatter echoing in the silence. I erased the message and began typing, pleading for help. I focused on the keys, refusing to look at the screen. But every keystroke felt wrong. When I finally looked up, the words on the screen chilled me to my core. I'm sorry. I've disappointed you all. For the last time, goodbye. I wanted to scream again, but noticed something had changed. I wasn't in the dining room anymore. I was in the study. The room's air felt thick, oppressive. I tried to keep typing, but the words became incoherent. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. I kept writing anything to stay focused, but my mind wandered. I thought about Buster. I thought about my life or the fragments I could remember. My memories were like broken shards, sharp but incomplete. Who was I? Who was my uncle? Did I even have a family? Questions spiraled endlessly. My hands trembled as I typed. I'm so tired, so hungry. The voices in my head grew louder, a cacophony of whispers and screams. I needed to focus. I needed to keep writing. If I stopped, I knew I wouldn't last long. But my energy waned. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy goodbye. The words blurred. The letters jumbled. I felt my grip on reality slipping. I'm sorry. I've disappointed you all. For the last time, goodbye. I'm a good dog. I know I am. I let my human sleep and work, and I only bother him when I truly need to. That's what good dogs do. I wish he fed me more. I wish he took me outside more. But he's my human, and I love him, no matter what. If only I could help him. Something's not right with him. He talks to himself, to the walls, to the empty spaces around us. I watch him run up and down the stairs like he's chasing something I can't see. I watch him walk in circles, trying so hard but always ending up back where he started. Sometimes, no matter how much noise I make, he doesn't seem to hear me. Today was worse. He fell down the stairs, hard, and then later he collapsed in front of his bedroom door. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. So when he came over, crying, and rested his head on me, I stayed as still as I could. I wanted to be the best pillow for him, the softest comfort in his storm. Then he did something strange. He went outside and dug a hole. A big one. Far bigger than any hole I'd ever seen him dig before. When he finished, he came back inside, wrapped his arms around me in the biggest hug, and carried me outside. I was so happy in that moment, being close to him, feeling his warmth, but then he laid me down in the hole. I'm a good dog, so I stayed right where he put me. That's what he needed, right? He started to shovel dirt over me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he didn't see me lying there. But the shovelfuls kept coming, even when I tried to move out of the way. He didn't stop. It hit me then, my human isn't well. Maybe he can't take care of me anymore, and this is his way of saving me, like how I bury my favorite bones to keep them safe for later. That thought made me happy for a moment. My human loves me enough to save me for later, but I'm still a living, breathing, reasonably intelligent creature. I hopped out of the hole before it got too dangerous. He didn't notice, he just kept shoveling dirt into the empty space where he thought I was. I watched him for a while from the edge of the woods. He didn't call for me. He didn't look around. It was like I'd disappeared from his world completely. Something's wrong with my human, and I don't know how to fix it. Maybe he just needs time and space to feel better. Until then, I'll wait here in the woods nearby. There's plenty to keep me safe and happy. A creek to drink from, soft grass to sleep on, and plenty of squirrels to chase. I'll be okay. And when my human is ready, I'll be here, waiting for him to come find me. Because I'm a good dog. And that's what good dogs do.